Looking at the workforce today, it has undergone a significant transformation. A transformation which, among other things, can be explained by the last couple of years' challenging times in economic, for example, the economic slowdown, the global pandemic, mass layoffs, the great attrition, where a record number of people, employees, are resigning or thinking about finding a new job. We've been talking a lot about the bigger trends affecting the world economics. But what about the engine, the workforce, the people? How have they been impacted by these unforeseen challenges? And how has the role of the leader changed, or should it change? My name is Caroline Hardt-Sehsted, and I have the pleasure of hosting this 10th TEDxCopenhagen live session with the overall topic, People, Not Just a Workforce. And today we are very happy to celebrate our 10th session, a little bit of an anniversary. So we are very happy that we have a special guest in our live studio here at Matricle 1. And our guest today is Rasmus Hougaard, who is the founder and CEO of Potential Project. And he's also the author of the groundbreaking and best-selling book by Harvard Business Press, The Mind of the Leader. Rasmus is also nominated by Thinkers 50 as one of the 8 most influential or important leadership thinkers in the world that we have today. He writes for Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and the Business Insider. He's a sought-after keynote speaker, a leadership developer who coaches and supports C-suite executives for global organizations such as IKEA, Accenture, Walmart, and Unilever. And soon, Rasmus is ready with his 4th book, Compassionate Leadership, How to Do Hard Things in a Human Way, which will come out here in January 2022. So let's see if we have Rasmus with us in the virtual studio. See if we can connect with him.
Hey there, Caroline.
Hi, Rasmus.
Nice to meet, and thanks for inviting. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. We have been looking forward to getting your insights. You are really the person who has the hand on everything that's going on in the work life right now. So we've been looking very much forward to talking with you. And Rasmus, you have been working with mental health in the workplace for leaders for decades. So we are, of course, curious to hear from you. What is your view on the main challenges for leaders today, looking at what has been going on for the last couple of years? Where do leaders struggle the most today?
It's a very good question. And while, of course, there would be individual answers to that, our global studies and the studies we're doing together with some other research partners is showing that it is absolutely the workload. The workload and the massive changes that are happening right now. Microsoft did a massive study finding that the increase of meetings, whether online or in person, over the last year and a half has increased with more than 30%, and the amount of emails with more than 40%.
Wow.
Like, how can you do this? So it's definitely a workload that is almost unbearable for many. And I think one of the things that then turns into, apart from the stress and that part of it, is that it is basically killing our hearts. When we get very, very busy, it kills our sense of connection, our sense of care for ourselves and others. So that is one of the main struggles right now, the workload that leads to a dehumanization of our, let's say, innate human behaviors, such as taking care of each other.
And so, Rasmus, if we take one step back and then look at what are the megatrends that have caused these workload to kind of explode, what do you see as the main driver of changing or transforming the workforce as we know it today, with a workload that is skyrocketing right now? And how do you, because I guess it requires some other leadership skills. You talked about the disconnectedness, new ways of working, but how does a leader make these tough decisions on changing the way we work and still remain, a good person and a good leader in the same time?
Wonderful question.
Here comes the golden answer that we're all waiting for.
I think a few things. The biggest change, obviously, that has happened in the work life, probably in the last 100 years at such a rapid speed, is due to the pandemic, and that means the hybrid work life, which is the biggest change that we've seen in such a short pace in the work life, I think, since forever. And the challenge that it's obviously posing is working from home. There is no limits. There are no boundaries between home and work. It is literally flipping open your laptop and you're at work, closing it, you're at home. And it's going to be very, very difficult to close it down when your boss and your colleagues are working. So everything is like spread out. Yeah. And I think while we talk a lot about, you mentioned in the beginning, the great attrition, I think the hybrid reality is also an opportunity for seeking what I would call the great attraction. Because whereas before you could only attract the people that were living in, a distance to where your headquarters is, that allows them to commute back and forward every day. But today, companies, apart from having the risk of losing great talent, they also have the potential for attracting like even much greater talent, whether that's from their own city, from their own country, or anywhere else in the world, because everybody now can basically log on to Zoom or wherever and be at work. So I think we need to reframe the whole idea of the great attrition with the great attraction. This is a massive potential, and what it takes from companies to really leverage that is to create deeply human cultures and really truly human leaders.
And how do you do that?
That's a great question. Well, from a Danish perspective now, both of us are from Denmark. Things are not that bad in Denmark. It's definitely much worse elsewhere, no doubt about that. But how do you develop compassionate leaders? How do you develop leaders that truly care for others? It starts with the mind. Yeah. Because we're talking about behavior change here. And behavior change starts with how we think. How we think determines what we say, what we do. So it's all about helping leaders to train their minds to have an orientation towards being present, being compassionate, being selfless, being truly there in the, let's say, service of the people that they work for. There's no silver bullet to this. It requires training. It requires a lot of culture change. This is what we do on a day-to-day basis in about 500 companies around the world. Yeah. So I know for a fact it's very, very possible.
Because in your upcoming book, Rasmus, you one of your key messages is this phrase to connect with empathy and lead with compassion. So what do you mean by, you can say, being human and work? How is mindfulness and increased awareness connected to leadership? Maybe you have some examples, because I know it can be easy to talk about, and we all nod and know that we need to be empathic and create psychological safety and be servant leaders and stuff like that. But how does it look when we meet in the office on a Wednesday gray morning? How does it look like in real life? Maybe you want to share some examples from the companies that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely can do that. But first of all, just to you talked about the connect with empathy, lead with compassion, which is actually a very important distinction. Many people think of those two words as being more or less the same. Empathy, compassion, same. But they're very, very different. Empathy is literally when we take on the emotions of others. And if we are a leader in a company and we lead a group of people, there's the hybrid world, there's a rapid change, there's a very significant workload. These people will experience suffering. If we as a leader lead with empathy, we take on a lot of suffering from others, and we're at the risk of burnout. So we should connect with empathy, let people know that we're there, we understand how they feel, but then lead with compassion, which means to move away from that emotional load that empathy is and move into how can I help? What can I do to help you? Yeah. And to make it really simple, all humans want to be happy and nobody wants to suffer. And having a leader that actually cares for you is one of the biggest precursors of having a good and positive and happy work life. So then how do we do this? And I can share a few examples because we've done this massive research with Harvard where we interviewed about 350 executives, and one of them that really inspired me a lot was the CEO of Southwest Airlines, one of actually the fastest growing company consecutive over 50 years in world history. They have this whole system set up whereby when anyone in the company, anyone out of their 49,000 employees is experiencing a loss in the family, serious illness, or anything else that is, difficult, the CEO gets to know on the same day, and the CEO will handwrite a note that will be sent express to that person to show that there is a concern from the very top of the organization to every single person in the organization.
Yeah.
Just one example of a lot of systemic and leadership behaviors that can be adopted. And it's all about thinking, if we want to attract the best talent, we need to treat people really, really well, much better than anywhere else they can go. Because if so, they will join us and they will love being here. They will work hard and we'll all have a great experience.
And is that expectation more than it have been before? And is it more in different generations, or is there a pattern you as a leader need to be aware of leading different kind of profiles?
Yeah, it is definitely much stronger than it has ever been before. The younger the generations, the more they will not stick up with bullshit leadership. Young people coming into the workforce, if they experience a bad leader, they will be out of there within a week or two. And that's just what the research is showing. Us older generations, we may stay a little bit longer, but at some point we get tired of it. Because we're all humans, we want to be treated well, we want a sense of belonging, we want a sense of meaning, and that's what we get when we have good human connections. So as leaders, if we can't do this, we're just going to lose the war on talent and we're going to lose business. It's that simple. And yes, the younger the people are, the more we need to apply a much more compassionate sense of leadership. And I should also just clarify, compassion doesn't mean to give people what they want. Compassion can also be tough love, giving tough feedback, restructuring, even firing. That can be done in a very compassionate way.
Yeah, because that was the question that I also prepared for you, Rasmus, in regards of all the different terms we have on leadership now and leadership roles. I mean, we talked about servant leadership and passionate leadership and authentic leadership, and now the new is compassionate leadership. Maybe you want to just put a few more words on how it's different and why it's even more important now than it has been before.
I think there are a few reasons. First of all, especially with the pandemic, there's been a tremendous amount of uncertainty, anxiety, stress, fear across the world. It's almost like a global collective trauma. And when we feel vulnerable and fearful and anxious, we're looking for people in authoritative positions, that is, whether it's politicians or whether it's our own direct leader, for them to actually bring a bit of care into the situation. So leaders right now have an amazing opportunity for really having strong human impacts. And that comes down to having that genuine care for people. It's almost like compassion and care. It's a universal language. Everybody understands when someone cares for you. And so that term about servant leadership and authentic leadership, all of these things, I would say, let go of all of that stuff. And leadership, I think, in the 21st century is about unlearning all management theories, all management schools of thinking, and relearning being human. Because we're all humans, want to engage with others in a human manner. That's it.
And when you talk about it, it makes a lot of sense and it sounds so simple. But I also look at a workforce and a leadership culture that's been used to doing things in a specific way for 20, 30, for some 40 years, CEOs in old traditional companies that now needs to kind of recalibrate how they lead. So what are the actions and the behavioral changes that we can do or leaders can do in order to do these hard things in a human way? What would be a good starting point? Because I think it's it's definitely easier for some than for others. So where to start
Absolutely.
if you want to be on the journey and not lose out on the good talents?
Exactly. That's a good question. And I'll just clarify one thing. There's actually not any data showing that the older leaders are, the less compassionate. Actually, the exact opposites. There is a very clear correlation between how leaders, how compassionate they are, and how fast and high they grow in rank in the organization. And that is possibly in many cases because if you don't have a care for others, your promotability is simply going down. And I think one of the great examples, like here in Denmark, we have a lot of really wonderful CEOs. One of the people that was part of the interviews for the research project, Mads Nipper from Ørsted, an incredible leader that is known like across the country for being a really, really people-centric leader. And he's not 25 or even 40 anymore. He's one of the more senior people.
Yeah.
So just to say, there's no correlation necessarily between age and how good a leader you are. But what are some of the actions, to your question? What are some of the actions we can do? I think the most fundamental one is to make a habit for ourselves that every time we meet a person, whether it's in a bigger meeting or just a one-to-one, whether it's over the water cooler and in a formal meeting on Zoom, to ask ourselves, how can I benefit this person? What can I do to make this person's life just a little bit better? If we make that a habit to always ask ourselves that and put that as an intention, I'm here to serve you.
Yeah.
Whether
So
that is giving
what's
tough
in it
feedback,
for you and not what's in it for me.
Exactly. Yeah. And it can easily mean that that's tough feedback, sharing news that this person don't want to know. Because if we do that in a kind way, then we help that person to grow and to develop. If we don't do it, we're basically leaving them on their own. And at some point, they will not grow and they will not progress in their careers.
Well, that's a good tip that is doable to implement, I guess, for most. Are there any, you talk a lot about mindfulness and being present and the more you can say self-reflective changes. What are some of the things that you as a leader can do to be more in contact with yourself and be present in the things that you do in general life? And I'm also thinking outside of work here.
Yeah. So whether we are a leader or not, we all have to take leadership first in our own lives, but also often for our friends or family and so on. So we're all leaders. Let's just be clear about that. And one thing that's both in my personal experience and from the research we have done shows that a practice of mindfulness, so a daily practice of sitting down for about 10 minutes and just turning inwards, focusing on the breath, noticing how you feel, what's coming up for you. That simple exercise of mindfulness practice, and I could list now all the benefits, but there are too many for me to do that, helps us, in short, to promote faster through our career. Basically, there's a strong correlation between how mindful we are and how fast we progress through a career. There's a strong correlation by how much we practice mindfulness and how we're perceived by the people that we lead. There's a strong correlation between practicing mindfulness and how happy we feel ourselves and how well we take care of ourselves. And then many, many, many other things. So one thing that I would recommend any person and any leader is to give themselves 10 minutes a day to sit down, close their eyes, and just notice what they feel like in this moment. Just that. Most powerful thing.
Yeah. Because you talked about also in your previous books, and I know when you're doing your keynote presentations about being present is something that we also really need to train. So how does, in your mind, being present look like, and how do you then actually know when you have achieved it? Because I know that some of us might think, well, I'm pretty grounded, I'm at a good place, I lead with authenticity, and I hear people, and but we may not be there. So how do we know when we have achieved being present? How does it feel like?
First of all, it feels good and it feels grounded. It feels like you are embodied. the more busyness we create in our lives, the more we lose connection with our body, and we become like a very head-focused entity on this planet. So what it feels like is it's grounded, it's embodied. We can always feel our feet, we can feel our chest, we're in contact with our breath. But I think more practically, it is when we know that we are present and attentive to what is happening right now. That's when we are present. And research is showing that 47% of our waking hours, our mind is somewhere else than where we are right now. It's called attention deficit trait. And that's a shocking number, because it basically means that even though we're at work, we're sitting in a meeting or we're sitting with our computer and doing emails, half of that time, our mind is in split seconds constantly moving away. And that is just killing our presence. So the more we can bring that back to be right here and be now, the better. And that's, again, fundamentally what mindfulness practice is helping us to be more present, to be more in the here and now.
Yeah. That's kind of eye-opening data, I think, for most. And I'm sure you also have some input on how it's connected to our performance. You also talk a lot about sleep, how it affects our performance. So maybe you want to share some input with us on how being grounded and focusing on mindfulness and getting the sleep and the restitution that you need, how it actually affects our performance and our deliverables in our everyday work life.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, mindfulness impacts our performance radically. We've done a lot of research on this, and it was published in our last book, The Mind of the Leader. Essentially, it helps us to be more focused. Focus equals performance. Performance equals productivity. So like just from a straight business perspective, that's really, really great. It also helps our resilience. When we're more resilient, we take more care of ourselves, we feel better, and then again, we work better. So I think from a work perspective, that's just great. From a personal perspective, what research has found is that we have a lower blood pressure, we have a stronger immune defense system, we have a more positive outlook on the world. So there's just so much good to say about that. It also helps our sleep. So to come to the point about sleep, when we practice mindfulness, on average, we sleep 33% better. So just imagine 10 minutes of sitting down every day will give you a 33% better sense of sleep. That's a return on investment. That's worth
a really
pondering
simple
for a moment.
investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let me just say what happens when we don't sleep well, and then I'll give a few tips for how to sleep better.
Yeah.
When we don't sleep well, our executive function, which is the part of the brain that's just behind the forehead on the right-hand side, is impaired. And the executive function is our ability to monitor what we're thinking and what we're saying and what we're doing moment to moment. So that means we are simply losing control of ourselves to some degree. The less we sleep, the more we lose it. The more we sleep, the stronger we are. So we're basically more in contact with ourselves when we sleep better. Then I'll not go into all the, I'll just share that. If we don't sleep, telomerase is not happening in the cells of our body. That means we're aging much faster. All our skin, our eyes, our muscles, everything is just aging much, much, much faster. Yeah. Our brain is literally shrinking when we don't sleep enough because it doesn't get the restitution that it needs. So it's just the most important thing. Personally, I live a life of managing around 300 people around the globe. I'm constantly in meetings, I'm constantly having emails. I used to travel around 250 days a year. My most important mantra is to never sacrifice sleep, and I always sleep at least 7.5 hours a night. Our research has showed that, and this is interesting, executives sleep around 7.5 hours a night, middle managers around 6.5.
Wow.
And it's interesting to see that the more you sleep, the senior you seem to get in an organization. Yeah. So it's really, really important from a performance, from everything. So how do we get better sleep? Here's a few simple tips. First of all, screens should be closed. Any kind of screen should be closed down at least an hour before, because in screens there's what's called blue rays, which is basically suppressing the pineal gland in the brain, which disables the ability to develop melatonin. Melatonin is what makes us sleep. So we want melatonin, and therefore no blue rays. That means no screens at all. That's one thing. The other really practical thing is 5 minutes before you actually go to sleep. So after you've brushed your teeth, kissed your partner or dog goodnight, sit down on your bed, close your eyes, not lie down, just sit down, close your eyes, and just follow your breath for a few minutes. What happens is that all the unsolved issues from the day will come up. You'll let go of them, and then you don't have to deal with them in sleep. It's just a really powerful way of getting into a restful state. Then you lie down, then you fall asleep.
So you have like a transition phase before you lay down.
Exactly. Yeah.
But Rasmus, with the theme today being people, not just the workforce, I know that we can get a lot of great tips in the books that you've already written, and also in your upcoming book. But I'm also, with all the people that you have been working with, as a leader, are there any companies or leaders that are valuable to look towards in regards of being inspired if you want to join the leadership transformation journey? Who are kind of the front runners on the paradigm shift within leadership right now? If you can reveal that, or it's a cliffhanger for your new book.
No, there are a lot, and some of them are organizations that one would not expect. And I won't mention them here because people may just have a reaction, but there are some surprises there. A few ones that I would mention that I think are really strong in the leadership space and really creating a modern way of leading. One is IKEA. We don't need to look further than just across the water to Sweden. Yeah, exactly. So IKEA is really has embarked on a journey over the past 3 years to create what they call leadership for the new era, which has just been a very, very impressive journey. We've been following them closely and been part of that process and writing a lot about it in the latest book as well.
Yeah.
In Denmark, I would say a company like Lego, very, very strong leadership values there. CHRO Lauren Schuster is a real genius in creating the kind of leadership that is needed for the new era. And then there are a lot of companies in Asia and Australia, around Europe and in the US. So they're all over. Over. There are a lot of good companies that are doing massive transformations right now.
But it's also, I guess, a need in regards when we talk about the great attrition or the even greater attraction that it's needed, that if you want to attract and maintain the good people, then you need to have the leadership style that talks to the employees or the workforce.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
I have one final question for you because we're running out of time, Rasmus. And this is kind of to get the broader perspective from your mind on how does a more human world of work look like in the future?
That's probably the most important question for any HR director to ask themselves. And I think it's a very serious question that should be pondered, really, really serious. And I'm not saying this because this is the purpose of my own organization, literally to create a more human world of work. I think a human world of work is where human potential can be actualized. The human potential that we all have for being happy, like genuinely happy and fulfilled, flourishing. The human potential for being kind to each other. The human potential for really living a good life, regardless of who we are. And so a human world of work is a place that is creating the systems, the processes, the cultures, and the space for that. And that requires leadership that embodies a strong sense of belonging, a strong sense of diversity and inclusion, that is really embracing people as they are and bringing a tremendous amount of care and compassion. That's a human world of work because people can flourish. There's still a long way to go, even for the best companies.
And I think with those beautiful words on flourishing the workforce by compassionate leadership, Rasmus, I want to say thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your words and wisdoms from working with global corporations all over the world, and your many years of research within this specific topic. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much, Caroline.
And with that, we are wrapping up the session, People, Not Just the Workforce. And it's been very exciting to have Rasmus with us today, talking about his perspective on leadership and compassionate leadership, and why it is so important. And it is because people is not just a workforce. So thank you to all of our followers. Thank you to our studio here in Matricle 1. And of course, a big thanks to the TEDxCopenhagen team, who has been done an amazing job behind the scenes. And we are very happy to wrap up the final session of Future of Work series. And if you have any input or comments or wishes on what we should do next, please let us know. And until then, take care. Bye.